thank you for joining our Matchmaker session today. My name is Juliana Weber, and I'm the coordinator for CityLAB Hamilton at the City of Hamilton. These events are where we learn about projects that have been submitted by staff members of the city or by faculty members, and we find good matches to connect staff, faculty, and students within a course to tackle projects. Today, we are joined by Dr. Christine Quail and Dr. Melinda Gough with the Gender and Social Justice Program at McMaster University. They'll be discussing ideas around building a more just and equitable city here in Hamilton. And I am happy to talk with them today. So thank you for joining, Melinda and Christine. And I'll ask you to first introduce yourselves and tell us about the role you have at McMaster and the research that you're involved in.
So my name's Melinda Gough, and I've been at McMaster, I think this might be 20 years now, exactly. Yes, and so I've been living in Hamilton during that time, most of that time, and have had a couple of years away for research leave and other parental leave things. And I have been involved in the Gender and Social Justice Program since the beginning of my time at McMaster. My own research is in women's performance histories in early modern Europe and in theater, going back to the age of Shakespeare. So I've done some interesting kind of collaborative, performance-centered work recently in that area, but I'm sort of trained as a literary and theater historian, but with a kind of gender-focused lens. But I'm also teaching in the Gender and Social Justice Program, where the connection between history and contemporary concerns is often an important aspect of the work that we do. And I have been part of the team that transitioned our program from an undergrad to a graduate program, at the center of which is the course that we're proposing the challenge from. And so I'll just turn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Juliana and Melinda. My name is Christine Quail, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies and Media Arts at McMaster. And I'm also in the Gender and Social Justice program as well. And I also have been helping with the undergraduate program in global peace and social justice. My research is interdisciplinary and is sort of a media and cultural studies approach to media and culture industries and texts and audiences and activism. My teaching at the undergrad and graduate level are largely around gender, race, and justice issues with media and cultural processes and practices. My research also, my main research project right now is a project on quilting and textiles, and as gender issues, labor issues, and sort of activism and critical issues come about through the histories of textile productions, and how folks are using textiles and quilting today and to make political statements. So, and I'm happy to be here and to work with CityLAB in our graduate course in Gender and Social Justice.
Those are both really fascinating avenues that you've taken your research. Yeah, that's really fascinating and very centered on the arts in different ways. So I'd like to ask you to kind of give a background of the proposal that you've put forth. Just give us some sort of context, some background, and what you're looking for in a partnership with city staff member.
Okay, sure. I wonder if it would be a good time to just share our slide deck, and we have just a quick background about our program and our students, which I think would help contextualize the project.
Absolutely.
Okay.
For it.
So our Gender and Social Justice program at McMaster used to be called the Gender Studies and Feminist Research Program, and we recently have changed our name, but to indicate that we do take gender and sexuality as core concepts, but we also are intersecting a variety of other sort of social categories like race, ethnicity, class, nation, age, ability, and we take a critical lens to particular issues from feminist, anti-racist, anti-colonial, colonial or decolonial, and queer and trans social justice lenses. As you could hear in both Melinda and my intros, we are very interdisciplinary ourselves as scholars, but our students also are very interdisciplinary and come from a variety of backgrounds, and they take coursework that spans different kinds of disciplines on campus as well, so that, you know, our program might be a little bit different than some of the other programs that have like a really specific disciplinary framework or is really key specific you know, point of analysis. That said, we also prioritize community engaged research and praxis in our program. So we have undergrad courses, but here we're talking about our master's and diploma course, knowledge and action. But most of our students in this course are going to be our master's students, and it's a one-year program. So we run from September through the following August, but our coursework usually ends in March, April. And then they complete a bigger research project on their own with a supervisor over the summer semester. We do have a PhD diploma for doctoral students at McMaster who are in specific disciplines and who are gaining an additional credential in gender and social justice by taking a few courses with us and then working with us on our research symposium and professionalization context. But it's unlikely that any of the PhD students will be in our course. Just again, these are some of the contextualizing courses that the students will be in. They'll be taking this course in the fall. So it's of course on doing anti-oppressive research. So one of their courses that they would be taking alongside the course that Melinda and I are teaching is sort of a research focused methods, but combined with a research symposium so that they'll be gaining some specific skills in that course. Our course is called Knowledge and Action and is a community engagement course in and of itself. So the main work that the students are doing is a critical sort of community engagement project focused on social justice and equity. And so part of this, you know, again, is this partnership. They are broken into groups. And I think we have 14 students, Melinda, or 12 students next year, and they'll be in probably about 4 groups. So what we would be working with CityLAB is one of those groups working with CityLAB, and other groups working with other community partners on specific challenges for that particular group. One of our approaches, which is something I think you wanted us to talk about too, is that we're interested in collaborative learning and collaborative projects. And have mentors, you know, take seriously the mentorship that our community partners provide to our students, along with Melinda and myself providing mentorships to the students from the other end as well. Maybe I'll turn it over to Melinda to talk a little bit about some of the past projects that we're.
Sure. So we just thought it might just help to be more specific about some projects we've done, and I know that Juliana's maybe going to ask some follow-up questions about that, and we can chat more. But this past year, I was teaching the course, and we had 2 projects for 9 students, so one group of 6, one group of 3. One project was for mission services. And actually was co-mentored, and one of the mentors there is a former master's student in this course from several years ago. And Mission Services really felt it was high time, even during the pandemic, to start really taking seriously the need for EDI training and initiatives, and really wanted to jumpstart some research around what mandatory training for mission services, employees and staff and volunteers, really across the breadth of the organization, might look like. So our students worked collaboratively with those mentors to devise what would be workable for them to do in the 6-month project. Where that project ended up landing was interviewing kind of key movers and shakers in the Hamilton landscape who are already doing EDI training within various organizations or for various organizations, interviewing them about best practices, pulling together some transcripts of the interviews, coding and transcribing the interviews and coming up with some suggestions, and then going away and researching about 10 different topics to write accessible and engaging short blurbs about particular sub-aspects of equity and diversity that might be relevant for future training for the organization. Our Fempire project, it was a multi-part project that involved researching particular, this was a grassroots organization that was interested in exploring alternatives to the nonprofit model to support and provide a platform for BIPOC, femme-identified media and theater artists here in Hamilton and the larger Greater Hamilton area or Bay Area. And they ended up researching funding opportunities, writing a grant application, figuring out, doing a pros and cons table of different crowd funding sources that the organization might take forward, and developing a literature review or annotated bibliography of resources, academic and otherwise, around disability in the arts and how the organization might, want to use some of these kinds of theoretical resources as they were moving forward with whatever initiatives they went with. We've done work with Queer Archives. We've done work with Center 3. And if you could just continue on to the next. We've done work with the 541 Eatery, where the organization was interested in different lenses to think through its connections with the immediate local community in that neighborhood. So in that project, very briefly, developing and bringing a kind of critical lens to something as simple as the menu, to make sure that there was Indigenous food sovereignty issues would be reflected in the menu. So if you go to 541, you'll see a Three Sisters soup that didn't exist before, a halal items on the menu that are marked as such, and a land acknowledgement that was developed with the organization in conjunction with that learning team.
That's really interesting. Thank you for giving that background, and kind of gives a sense of the different ways that students can engage in different projects. I believe you mentioned that city staff have been mentors on projects in the past, and I don't know if you've had a project that was solely with a staff member, or if they've just served as mentors. But if you could can you give us an example of when city staff have been involved in projects in the past, and what those projects were, and what the staff role was in that?
So we have had city staff who have been mentors on projects, but not in their role as workers at the city.
Okay.
So I'll just, 3 people that just come to mind immediately who've been involved in the course in particular ways with particular projects would be Jessica Bowen, who's actually a graduate of our program from our very first year of 11 years ago, did a project with the YWCA of Hamilton with a youth program and financial literacy, went on to work at Humber College in their equity and diversity office, and is now the head of equity and diversity for the city of Hamilton. So she has not mentored a project, but she's been mentored in a project and is now working for the city. And Pauline Kajora has visited our class and she was actually working for the Red Book of Hamilton before she took up the role in Jessica's office at the city. And she came just to orient our students at the beginning of the year to the kind of landscape of activism and advocacy work that's happening in Hamilton. What makes Hamilton, what is specific about Hamilton and the landscape that students might want to know about or have questions about as they're thinking about entering into the work of the city more broadly through these projects. And then Cole Gately has been involved in, I would think, 3 or 4 different projects as a mentor. And I should just clarify, your question made me realize that in our language, like the mentor is someone who is with the organization, who's is the primary point of contact and overseeing the project in conjunction with Christine and myself. So we might have someone come and visit the class like Pauline did and not be a mentor for a project. I think behind your question partly was like, what does a staff, like what does a staff member bring? Like what can they bring? And I think those 3 examples would suggest maybe a kind of breadth of and a bigger picture framework about the network of Hamilton, as my partner likes to say, is like the biggest little town, or like the biggest village in southern Ontario. It's like the connections are astonishing and not visible to someone who's coming to Hamilton for the first time. And then there's different kind of layers of how things happen in the city. And so just a sense of that kind of broader picture, and also a very like a kind of nuts and bolts of hows. We do ask actually that mentors agree to orient the students. It might take a little bit more time to orient them to either the physical or the social or the economic landscape of their organization specifically, so they can meet people that they're going to need to know, or how to find out who they should be talking to at the organization, some basic kind of protocols and practices and missions and values of the organization, so that is the mentor as the main point of contact with the organization takes responsibility for that. Just having the mentors as a kind of like a touchstone for students to help anchor as they're working through the nuts and bolts of the project and provide that kind of perspective. Christine and I can provide one set of perspectives, but a perspective on the organization and a perspective on the wider landscape of how change happens here.
Okay, that puts things into context. Thank you. So building on that, what does the partnership look like in terms of the staff side, like time commitment, involvement, expectations? Can you give us a bit of what your expectations are for a partner?
Sure. So because we've had this course for quite a long time, Melinda and some of the other faculty that have been teaching it have developed a project manual. So that's something that, well, Juliana, we'd like to give this to you so you can share this with any other folks who are on the call or who are interested in working with us. So we have laid out a somewhat concrete set of student responsibilities, mentor responsibilities from the organization, and then Melinda and my responsibilities. And so we have that, or we call ourselves the academic supervisors, and then the community partner is the mentor. And that I mentioned earlier, we do want this to be a collaborative, reciprocal relationship for the mentors and for us as supervisors and for our students, to engage ethically and responsibly and with a justice lens. I think that that's sort of the framework that one would really kind of need to take. We have, before the semester starts, we kind of get details in order, and we have an MOU that we have our mentors sign. we have a meeting in September where it's sort of a meet and greet where the mentors, and we'll probably be doing this on Zoom this year, but the mentors come to meet the student groups for an initial meeting and sort of talk about the project. And then throughout the year, our students work with the mentors and have maybe bi-weekly meetings with them.
Well, I know that your students have a really wide breadth of skills. What would you say the type of research that they excel at the most is, or the most typical kind of research? Would it be primary research, literature reviews? What do you generally see in these projects?
So again, since we have a very interdisciplinary group, we do tend to have a variety of different skill sets each year that the students bring. We've noticed that they're particularly strong at qualitative approaches and critical approaches to research. So things like, interviewing or, observing, event planning. We've had students that run surveys, but they're a little bit better at the qualitative data analysis rather than the quantitative data analysis. Sometimes we do have students who can run and crunch numbers, but typically it would be a more qualitative analysis. Environmental scans, literature reviews, secondary literature reviews, and or annotated reports like that. So they can do a variety of secondary and primary research, and it sort of just depends on getting the right match for the community need and the student skill set. So it's pretty broad.
We can maybe move on to the Q&A in a moment, but is there anything else that you'd like to share? Maybe some specific examples you want to share about what your students have done in the past, or any last words?
Yeah, I will just build a tiny bit on what Christine said. We try to take the lead initially from the partner, the community partner organization. And this is going to sound wishy-washy, but it's not. It's not like we'll do anything, but we're really rooted in a commitment to the idea that community university engagement cannot be driven by the university, that it has to be driven by the community needs. We're exceptionally aware that our allies and colleagues working on the ground in the city are completely overtaxed and understaffed and underfunded, and that serving our students by mentoring them is a commitment. And in exchange for that labor and work, and it is often beneficial to the mentors who talk about how exciting it is to work with students who are really kind of constantly thinking at a kind of critical edge, and with the kinds of social justice commitments that they have, that this can be refreshing and revive some of the brain, like the burnout, right, of working on the ground, that they may have missed having those kinds of conversations. And so getting to connect with the students at the graduate level can be really exciting for them, but it's also labor. So like a main thing that we just really emphasize is that we don't imagine this as a placement. The work that they do in this course does end up helping them in the kinds of careers that they want to do, but that's not the aim of the course. The aim of the course is to build these, to be able to figure out how to work collaboratively in ways that keep sort of certain values and principles in play, of equity primarily, and at the same time are really getting down and dirty with the hows and the challenges and bumping up against the interpersonal dynamics that play in kind of moving forward this kind of change work.
Yeah. So, and it sounds like a real strong benefit both ways. They're getting this really intense level of work and examination on a certain issue. Well, I will wrap that up and we can move to the Q&A.